And welcome to the webinar today, Why Top Social Game Companies Are Moving to the Cloud with RightScale. Before we get into the webinar, we're going to conduct a couple polls so that we understand who's on the webinar today. So the first poll will launch right now. If you could take a minute to answer the question. And the question is, do you currently have a game deployed on a social network such as Facebook? And we'll give it a second here as people are answering. Okay. It looks like the majority of our audience doesn't yet have a game deployed, but there's a 10–12% that's actually in development. And then there's a handful of you that are actually already deployed. So thanks for answering that poll. Now we're going to go to the next one, which is around what you're doing out there on the cloud today. So if you could take a moment to answer this question. Are you using the cloud today as an infrastructure as a service, for example, Amazon EC2 or RightScale? So if you could answer that question. Okay, and it looks like, well, we've got a good mix in the audience here in terms of how much you've used the cloud, and about a quarter of you have not yet used the cloud. And so I think you'll be excited about today's webinar to find out more. And now we'll get started. So again, welcome. My name is Elise Arthurs, and I'm the Director of Partner Marketing here at RightScale. And we're really excited today to have our very first webinar that is entirely focused on our solution for running social gaming applications on the cloud with RightScale. RightScale's success in the social gaming market comes from working with the top companies that are delivering Facebook games today. But in addition to that, we have a lot of experience, years of experience as a matter of fact, working with many customers in other industries to deploy their applications in the cloud. So before we begin, just a couple of housekeeping items. We've got a question section on the GoToWebinar screen where you can actually ask us questions during the entire webinar. And we've got a team standing by that will answer your questions live. And then we will also have a live Q&A at the end. So just as you have questions, please put them in that GoToWebinar window and we'll answer them. And then now I'm also pleased to introduce our speakers. We have Josh Fraser. He's the VP of Business Development here at RightScale. And then David Welsh, who's a sales engineer here at RightScale. They'll take you through the presentation and the demo today. And then on question and answer, we've got Hunter Williams, who is our Senior Account Manager here at RightScale. So with that, I'm pleased to introduce our speakers. Take it from there, Josh.
Great, thanks, Elise. Welcome, everyone. Appreciate everyone taking the time to join us today. So let's dive right in. So we're going to take you through a couple key things here. First, just a very, very brief introduction to RightScale. I think most of you hopefully are familiar with us, but we'll give you a quick color on what we do and where we fit in. And then we're going to dive into social gaming in the cloud, what it is, what we've seen, and more importantly, the solutions that we're delivering to address all the key life cycle stages that a social game goes through. We've prepared a series of demos that address each phase, so Dave's going to take you through that. And then, as Elise mentioned, send those questions in at any point. We'll answer a few ad hoc during the webinar itself, and then there'll be time at the end. So let's get started. So RightScale, who are we? RightScale is a cloud management platform. We've been at this almost since day one, specifically a month after Amazon EC2 launched, so over 3 years now. We've launched 835,000 servers, so curious if you want to send in your thoughts on when we'll hit 1 million. We're glad to take those. The focus has always been on customers, specifically what customers are willing to deploy commercially in the cloud and pay for. So an intense focus on our customers, and with that we've seen a very wide range of customers from very small startups up to Fortune 100 companies and everything in between. Where we fit in is RightScale as that layer between the applications that you want to run and the various infrastructure providers like Amazon Web Services and Rackspace that you want to run them on. We are a platform, but it is delivered as a software as a service. The specific focus of RightScale is on the entire lifecycle management of your application in the cloud. That includes everything from easy ways to very quickly get up and running on the cloud using a dynamic configuration methodology, a way to actually manage an entire system on the cloud, not just individual servers. But we don't stop there. RightScale also addresses, a lot of the common, control and access and management tools that you'd be familiar with in a traditional data center environment. And further, we make sure we do all this by retaining portability and control and transparency, so you're free to move around amongst the various different infrastructure providers that are out in the market. Some of the key components that you'll hear about today, so I just want to highlight a few of these so you can tie this back to what they mean within RightScale speak. The first is deployments. What deployments are simply are multiple resources that you can manage as one. So this is a very, very important theme when you look at a lot of different ways that RightScale approaches automation. RightScale macros are just an automated way to build a deployment. And then finally, server templates. Think of those as definitions of servers, but they're definitions of servers that are preserved within the RightScale dashboard. So they remain constant and are component-driven, making it very, very easy to have a repeatable process as resources come and go. So social gaming. This is an incredibly exciting space, and social gaming to us and hopefully to most of you, really means those browser-based, delivered either online on the web or on handheld mobile devices, those browser-based games. A lot of the economic models behind these are virtual goods. So we wanted to share with you a couple reports and quotes here. So the first is, back in October, the virtual good market was forecasted to reach $1 billion by the end of the year. So already this is just a huge, huge space. We're seeing incredible growth in events already take place. A couple of the key ones, two of our customers, Electronic Arts buying Playfish, that for around $400 million, happened last fall. And then towards the end of the year, Zynga, perhaps the largest and best known these days of the social application providers, certainly on Facebook, roped in nearly $250 million in funding and had a valuation rumored to be in the multi-billions. So very exciting stuff going on in the space. Specifically RightScale, we've been fortunate to have kind of an early success in dealing with managing a lot of these top games. Wanted to share with you just a quick snapshot. This was taken, it looks like, on January 8th, so just a few days ago, by Developer Analytics that tracks the top applications out there on the web. As you can see here, RightScale has the good fortune to be a part of managing, it looks like 10 of the top 12 applications total, and then all 3 of the top 3 companies. So what this has led to for us, and then in turn for you, our audience, is an extensive amount of experience in dealing with some pretty unique and incredible scale metrics in terms of how you deploy and manage a social app in the cloud. So we have experience, both our product, our platform, and our support team, in dealing with things like 600,000 concurrent users. We've seen scaling events that exceed 100x in just a few days. New user rates in the 250,000. We've seen a 0 to 35 million unique user increase visits per day. So some huge, huge scale deployments. And what we've done now is we've kind of taken that experience and packaged it up into a much more deliverable, kind of fully baked product that you can take advantage of today. So let's get started on the demo. We've broken this up into 4 main pieces, and we wanted to take you through kind of each of the major lifecycle stages that a social application on the web would go through. And we've got a little kind of key points on each and then a demo on each. So let's dive in, and starting with the concept and development phase. This phase is all about kind of getting your game and validating it. Okay, so you're developing this, it's not yet in market, you're testing a few things out. So the key things that are really important here are obviously things like getting access to resources at a very low cost and very quickly, but doing it in such a way that sets you up for success. So that brings us into our first demo, and what we're going to show you here is a scenario where you have a new game. So this is an organization called Social Game Productions, and within this organization they have a few games that are already in production, but you'll see in Social Game 4, this is a new team. So they're in the concept and development phase, and what they're going to do is they're going to access a pre-configured deployment. It's going to be delivered as a RightScale macro. So very quickly they're going to be able to access this macro, and this macro is going to automatically build out a 5-server cluster that includes an application tier, a memcache tier, and a database tier that incorporates best practices and, more importantly, was created and controlled and published by the admin in that respective organization. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave Welch. And Dave, take it away.
All right, thanks, Josh. So I'm going to start in the Enterprise Management page. So what you're looking at here is the ability to separate each of your social games into separate accounts. You'll see why this is important when we talk about user permissioning later. So now let's say we want to test out an initial game, as Josh said. I'm going to show you how easy it is to create a concept deployment by jumping into the social game number 4. What I'm trying to accomplish is with a few clicks to create your initial concept architecture. I'll do that by running a social game macro.
So Dave, this is a separate set of cloud credentials. So we have isolation not only within RightScale, but also in this case, Amazon?
Yeah,
okay.
Isolation between your cloud vendors.
Okay, got it.
So I'm going to go ahead and run this, and it's going to ask me to create a deployment name. And while this is executing, it's creating the 2 front ends, your master and slave database, and adding that memcached here. Furthermore, it's adding an application array, which I'll show you later. So if we go to the dashboard, we can see that the infrastructure that it just created. And the red squares are showing that these servers are stopped. So the infrastructure has been set up. We just now need to run these servers.
Okay, I got it. So I think I got this here. So what it looks like here is you've created a 5-server cluster, but then also an array as part of this single deployments that you can manage as a single deployment called social game that you can manage as one unit. Is that right?
That's right. So now all I have to do now is add my database to the master and slave, and then create an input for your application repository that loads it onto the 2 front ends.
So what would be the alternative? I mean, here we have this kind of fully baked blueprint, if you will, of a cluster of servers, an entire system that has been proven best practices to be able to manage a social app. What would you have to have gone through if this wasn't the case?
You're probably going to have to create different images, for your database, for your application, for your applications here, and for your memcached here. You have to manually set it up. Here we provide, with a few clicks, you can set this up in, less than 5 minutes.
Got it. Okay, great. Thanks. So jumping now back over to the slides. So here you saw an example where, very quickly you can get access to an environment that you can do your concept development and testing against. It incorporates best practices, and it was controlled by the broader, organization of the admin on your account. So we're not kind of taking the control out of the IT admins, but giving them a way to easily publish best practices. So let's move on to the production and growth phase. So what this phase is all about, this is arguably one of the more exciting phases, right? So that concept has panned out. You validated your new game, and you're ready to take it to market. So what are the key concerns, at this phase? Well, time to market is huge. All right, this is a highly, highly competitive space. Games come and go, and you want to be able to, as quickly as you validate that game, push it into production. However, you want to make sure that when doing so, you're setting yourself up to succeed. What good is pushing it in production and having that runaway success if the thing's going to fall down because it's not set up to automate and scale? So the next thing we're going to show you in this second demo is how using RightScale, you'd set up kind of 3 key things within your deployment to ensure that you have the appropriate level of automation, in this particular case, auto-scaling, and also how you go about re-architecting your entire deployment to meet kind of the growing needs of your social game. Specifically, Dave's going to take us through how to configure auto-scaling both up and down. Remember, it's not just about adding resources, it's also about adding resources smartly in a manner in which you can manage your costs and then taking those resources away when they're no longer needed. Second, we're going to take you through a little bit more of an advanced concept. This would be an actual re-architecting of the deployment itself. So that system that you saw Dave create, that social game deployment, he's going to re-architect that by substantially changing that memcached layer. And then finally, you're going to see how you can use RightScale to do some optimization and runtime configuration of that running deployment. So Dave,
all right,
take us through it.
So in the last demo, I showed you how you created that initial concept architecture. So that deployment created an array of application game servers, which you can see down here. Now, in order to enable the auto-scaling, I'm going to add alerts onto the front ends to monitor when to scale up and when to scale down.
And Dave, so some of the scenarios on why you'd want to kind of change the resizing ratio on the way up versus the way down?
If you're getting hit with a lot of traffic, you might want to jump up by 10, 20 servers, and scale back down with a few servers from there.
So a little bit more conservative approach, maybe resize at a much more aggressive rate on the way up, and then a little bit less on the way down. Okay, and you can split that up. Is this the only metric that you could do auto scaling on? Is CPU idle?
Oh no, that you can do a whole host of metrics. So for this demo, we're just going to do the CPU idle value.
So pretty common kind of load-based scaling scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I'm going to do 50 for a couple minutes to scale up.
And Dave, what's interesting here too is that at any point during this life cycle, you can go back in and change that if you want.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if you're finding yourself kind of, misestimating, what sort of rate you're going to need to grow your environment at, you can go and reset these variables and scale at a faster rate if need be.
Exactly.
Okay.
So a few seconds here for a couple minutes, and then we're going to want to scale down.
Got it. Okay.
So now I'm going to switch to a running environment to show you how I can re-architect my environment when you're hitting that growth phase. So I'm going to do that by jumping back into the production where we had our running servers.
Okay, so now we're going to take that deployment we've been working with. That was what you created off the macro, so we hadn't yet launched that. So now we're going to go dive into an actual production deployment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I'm going to run another macro to add memcache servers into that deployment.
Okay, so what's the scenario here?
So the scenario here is, the throughput is being exceeded on your current memcache tier,
Okay.
so you're going to want to add some more, and then configure them.
I think what's really interesting about what you're about to show us here is that this is an actual re-architecting of the deployment itself. Okay, so before what you showed was how an application tier is scaling horizontally, up and down. Now we're taking that fixed 5-server cluster and actually re-architecting it and adding, how many are we adding here?
Here we added 10 memcache servers.
10 memcache. Okay, so a pretty substantial re-architecting.
Mm-hmm. So when I jump back into this deployment, you're going to see that the servers are not actually running. So the next step would be to launch these servers and then to run an operational script to pre-populate the memcache servers and then make the application servers aware of these new servers.
So that operational script, that's kind of the runtime configuration that you can do?
That's the runtime configuration. Okay. And just to point out, you could run it across all your application servers. So you don't have to manually go through one by one and run them.
Okay. So as extreme as this seems, kind of re-architecting this deployment to add 10 new memcache servers, I mean, the reality is if you think back to some of those metrics that we shared with the audience early on, I mean, this actually happens, right? You have this, you go viral on Facebook and you have these massive, massive scaling events, beyond what your wildest imaginations had planned for, and all of a sudden you're finding yourself in a situation where you need to add hundreds and hundreds of resources, 25 additional servers to your memcache tier. What would you do if you didn't have automation tools like this to do that?
Well, it's going to be a manual configuration. It would be kind of a pain, but you really need the ability to add these servers very quickly.
Okay. So Dave, why don't we just take a quick pause here? We got a couple questions here that are relevant. One is, how do the existing app servers know about the new memcache servers that are coming online?
So that's where the operational script would take place. So in the operational script, you would have to push that out to the application servers to make them aware of the new memcache servers that we added.
And I think it's not only the operational scripts, but also those scripts contain RightScale inputs. Is that correct? And those inputs are shared deployment-wide?
No, that's right. Okay. So across the entire environment.
Got it. Yeah, so at RightScale, what we call that is being able to launch servers in context. So this all gets back to that managing at a system level, and it's the ability to both bring on and shed resources in context of a broader deployment. So servers can come online like a new memcache resources. They know they're a part of a certain deployment. They know what their roles are, and the other servers that are within that deployment are sharing common input parameters. So therefore, they can very quickly become productive members of that deployment.
Exactly.
Great. Well, thanks, Dave. Let's jump into the next phase, and here's the maturity and decline phase. So this is a pretty interesting one. So here's a scenario. You've made it. This game is a runaway success. Consumers are enjoying it, playing every day. You're not seeing those massive spikes anymore, both up or down. However, a whole new set of key concerns has now entered the equation. Things like, what is this game actually costing me? Kind of breaking it down. Am I making any money here? How do I optimize this deployment so that I can maximize my margins? And then finally, who has access to this deployment? These are big businesses. Think back to that virtual good estimate for $1 billion by the end of 2009. There's a lot of money being made on these social applications and selling virtual goods. So concerns over who can do what to this deployment become very, very important. So what we're going to show you in this phase is a couple things. We've already touched upon how you do certain levels and certain types of optimization. That's that runtime configuration and those scaling parameters that you can set within RightScale. So those not only can be used to do auto scaling on the way up, but also by fine-tuning it, you can better optimize your deployment when it reaches this kind of maturity steady state. So what we did want to take you through is a couple other things. First, we'll take a look at how RightScale provides tools in which you can get better cost accounting. So understanding, what is at a deployment level, what is this specific deployment costing me, understand run rates by the hour, et cetera, et cetera. And then second, we'll show you how RightScale is addressing different user class assignments and access controls. So with that, Dave, I want you to take us through deployment tracking and user access.
Definitely. So here I'm at the overview page, and right down here we can see that the deployment budget estimates. So here we have some insight into what it's currently costing us in real time, and what the projection is. What's it going to cost us later down in the month, and what it cost us in the prior month as well.
So Dave, just looking at those names, it looks like we got a whole bunch of different deployments, so multiple different systems all within this one account. In each one, you're able to track the run rate real time by the hour, right?
How much it's costing you. Yep.
Okay, and then you got month to date, and then it looks like prior month. So this is actually great stuff, because if you think about in the cloud, you have this on-demand pay-as-you-go, which is one of the more important and powerful value propositions the cloud offers. But you can get caught off guard if you don't have an easy way to track and real-time way to track what you're actually spending. You get that nasty surprise at the end of the month.
Yeah, you don't really get any insight if you have any servers that were left running and you're no longer using them.
Interesting, yeah. I think what's another interesting scenario is if you can see in deployments, you may have resources that are just running and running and running and not actually part of any production deployment, that you may be able to shed those resources and save some cost.
And then you want to be alerted so you can shut them down.
Got it, okay.
So next I'm going to take you through a common scenario on when you're going to want to revoke someone's permission in an environment. So if we go back to the enterprise account management page, now let's say Josh, you were on game 1, but now we want to put you on game number 4, but we're moving your team, so we want to revoke your access from having access to the game 1 servers.
So David, it looks like right here, though, just so everyone is on the same page here, we have in this social game production, that's the enterprise mother account, if you will. Is that right? Okay, and then we have, it looks like social game 1 through 4, so we have 4 unique accounts that are managed under this enterprise umbrella. Also looks like we have consumption going on multiple different clouds, and then isolation that's been created, and then cost accounting that's available on each of these games.
That's right.
Okay.
We can also see current run or month to date and the projection as well.
Got it. So now I was on this runaway success game, and now you're going to move me over to the concept team on the next game. Is that right? Okay. So you don't want me to access that production deployment anymore.
No, and then under this umbrella, I can manage your permissions for all of those accounts.
Okay.
So here I'm going to remove you from game 1, and I'm going to remove the server login permission.
So it looks like we have things like ways that I can actually consume resources, so that would be an actor.
Mm-hmm.
So light user, what's that?
A light user gives you a minimized view of our dashboard. So you can no longer edit your SSH keys in your cloud. So you need someone who has an enterprise manager or an actor to go ahead and do that for you.
So that's a scenario like a new concept team comes on, and not only are you going to restrict what they can do, but you're actually going to restrict what they see.
Yeah.
So that within RightScale, they're only getting access to a specific deployment that has these best practices in it to be able to do their concept testing.
And so you can have the sysadmins do their job in architecting the infrastructure, and have the developers only worry about launching the servers.
Yeah, this seems like a lot of things that traditional data center operations are used to and would expect. The ability to have some level of control and access and permissioning and transparency, but applied to now public and hybrid cloud scenarios.
And this is added on top of all the cloud vendors.
Okay, great.
So now I'm going to add you. I'm going to give you actor privileges. So remember, we're switching teams.
Okay.
What this is going to do is that behind the scenes, when I save this, give you server login so you can have access to the servers. And when I save this, now it's going to remove your SSH key from all those game 1 servers. So now you no longer have access.
Got it. So, hugely important, not only for this scenario, but also, this is such a vibrant market. A lot of these kind of teams that are coming up with these great concepts, they may leave the organization entirely, right, in the hopes of having their own startup game that has, hits it big and getting bought.
Yeah, and RightScale provides the user-based key management.
Got it. Okay, great. Appreciate it, Dave. That brings us to the final phase, which we're calling the niche and end-of-life phase. So here's the scenario here. Your game has made it. You've optimized this. You understand what it's bringing in as far as revenue. You're managing your margins. You've controlled the users that have access to it. You don't want to pull the plug on this game, but you do want to be able to take everything that you've learned, so all these new best practices and all the reconfigurations you've done in that RightScale deployment, such as re-architecting the memcached here that you saw, okay, and you want to package those up. You don't want to just throw those away. You want to basically take that learning and extend it now to the next game. So what you're going to see in this niche phase is a way that you would do that very, very easily and very quickly. It's using a feature within RightScale that we call cloning. And what Dave's going to do is he's going to take an entire system, this deployment that we've been doing the demonstrations off of, and he's going to clone that system. He's then going to take you through how you would change a few of those deployment-wide input variables so that you're gearing that system up to take care of the next game that's coming, and then have that be set to relaunch, and then get access to the new team.
All right. So now that we've changed this, we've added the memcached here. We've, for best practices when we've experienced the growth. Now with one click, I can clone this environment. So right now, this is our running production environment. And by cloning it, it's just going to duplicate or copy the configuration information for this entire cluster. In a moment here, now you can see here's the copy of it, and all the servers are currently stopped.
Okay, got it. So now this is, if we go back up to the top there in the name, so this is this version 1. This is an exact replica of that production system now, but it's now been moved over, essentially taking a blueprint of that system. And now what would be the next logical step that you'd go through to re-architect this game?
If we wanted to bring up an environment for QA, you can label it QA, and then in the inputs, I can change a couple parameters like, change it to test database and whatnot. And then if I wanted to do, add additional game, I can change the app repository in one of the inputs down here.
Interesting. Okay. So I think, again, it seems like there's some recurring themes here. A lot of this has to do with kind of the alternative, which is you'd have to build each of these from scratch, deal with machine images, reconfigure at the command line. Here's a scenario where very quickly you're able to codify best practices, all right, apply those to a new game in just a few clicks, and then get up and running again. So all about time to market, all about business ability.
Yeah, it goes back to the wheel, the RightScale wheel of best practices, making it for full circle.
Specifically because what you can now do with this deployment is you can create a macro off of this deployment and then publish that macro into another account. Is that right?
And the other accounts, they can just run this macro, and it'll build the exact configuration, so they don't have to reinvent the wheel here.
Exactly. Okay, so very cool. So we've actually got, we're right back to where we started at our first demo, where we entered that Game 4 account, and the only thing that was exposed was that single macro. But the key difference now is this isn't the same. Right? We've incorporated the changes that we've made. We've incorporated those best practices and those learnings from this first game success, and we've applied it to the next one.
Yeah. And that really goes back to repeatability of your infrastructure.
Okay. And that repeatability is really what the server templates enable. It's kind of taking that definition of a server that's component-driven that you can then have assurances that every resource that you're going to launch with that template is going to be the exact same.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay. Well, thanks, Dave. So that takes us through the 4 main life cycles. What we wanted to do now is share with you a couple more advanced concepts. And, this is really enabled by RightScale's approach towards multi-cloud and portability. So we want to talk about 2 things that we've seen our customers take advantage of today. The first is multi-region arrays. So Amazon, as most of you probably know, has multiple different regions that they offer through Amazon Web Services. There's US East, there's US West, there's UK, and most recently they've announced, but have not yet gone live with, their Singapore region. So the great thing about this is these are, for the most part, independent clouds. So there's separate resource pools that have to be managed and accessed using a separate image library, so on and so forth. That introduces a lot of complexity when you want to take advantage of that, but it also introduces a tremendous amount of opportunity when you really want to optimize the performance of your social app for your users. So a typical example would be you have gamers who you have some predictability on when they're going to be accessing and using your game. And you can tailor the resources that you provision for those gamers based on what geography that they're in. The way that you do that within RightScale is through that arrays concept. And you can see down on here, we've taken a snapshot. We showed you earlier that array within that gaming deployment that Dave built out using the macro. But here we have two arrays, one that is growing and shrinking in the U.S. Region, and then another one that is growing and shrinking in the EU region. And each of these can be set independent of one another in terms of how fast they scale up and how fast they scale down. So very, very powerful when you look to kind of optimize and increase overall performance. The next thing we wanted to talk about is multi-cloud. And there's a couple key things on multi-cloud to point out. The first is multi-cloud is not just about multiple independent resource providers. Multi-cloud is also about how you take advantage within Amazon of the multiple regions that they offer. Again, those are separate resource pools that need to be addressed and accessed and managed separately. So one of the great functionalities within RightScale is you have the ability, again, using this deployment and managing at a systems level approach to add resources from different cloud pools. So again, we're looking at kind of our standard 5-server cluster, and if you look down there at the bottom left, you can see where you can select any of the clouds that RightScale supports, which to date, what we've announced include Rackspace, all of Amazon's resources. We've also announced support for a few different private cloud enabling technologies, including Eucalyptus and vCloud. But you can add resources from these different pools into that same deployment. So managing it as a single deployment, but taking advantage of resources from multiple different pools. And then finally, what we've done here is we've actually packaged all of the learnings and all of the best practices from our experience thus far in the social gaming space, and we've actually created a formal RightScale edition that we're now offering our customers. So this is live today, so you can take advantage of it at any time. But it includes a couple key things and some of the things that you saw in the demonstration today. First, it does get you access to those pre-configured deployments that include RightScale best practices. Okay, so we've learned a lot through our experiences this past year dealing with some of the largest and fastest growing social apps out there. So we've taken those learnings and packaged them up into best practices that are now available to you. We also have what we're calling migration management. Simply put, this is access to a team of subject matter experts within RightScale that have taken our customers through these procedures, not only about helping them architect their deployment for that initial launch, but also the team that's dealt with the type of massive scaling events that you saw and heard us talk about earlier. It is Facebook ready. So there are a lot of nuances when you're deploying your application on Facebook that, simply put, just take a lot of time. It's not that customers couldn't learn them on their own, but in a market that's all about competitive time to market and getting that game out as soon as you possibly can, taking advantage of a team that's dealt with launching and deploying applications on Facebook over and over again is hugely valuable. Some of the other things that are part of this package include optimization consulting. So this becomes very, very important once you reach that maturity phase. So that becomes much more, margin management. How am I making money? Who has access to what? And what we found is oftentimes RightScale, using our expertise and our shared knowledge of what we gathered through launching nearly 1 million servers in Amazon, and we can apply that to various different ways that we can help you optimize and get the most bang for your buck when deploying in the cloud. And then last but not least is that virtual on-site support. So what this is all about is at launch, we're right there with you. So we have our professional services staff that is available 24/7 in this kind of window that's open to them, so chat windows and phones and whatnot, so to make sure that your launch goes smoothly and to make sure that if you do go viral, that you have a team standing behind you that's ready to jump in the fire with you. So we've been through this many, many times, including the first and one of the more famous scaling events with Animoto, almost 2 years ago now. And we know the experiences and we know what comes up and how to address them. So this is a way for you to take advantage of that expertise.
Okay, Great, Josh. Thanks, Josh and Dave. We've got a couple questions here, and I just want to remind everyone to submit your questions via the question section there, and we'll take your questions live. So here's a question, Josh. This is a great one. I think my app is going to be successful. How do I scale the database?
Okay, that's a great question.
How do I scale the database? Okay. So with the, that's why you have the memcache tier. Well, when you scale a database, you really be working with our partners in database sharding. Most of our customers who are on Facebook today, instead of scaling out, you can scale out the reads really with the memcache tier, but you really want to shard your database and split that up. We have many partners who help and provide support for that.
So Dave, maybe it'd be helpful and topical if we show the server template library and some of the partners that we work with. So I think database scaling, there's really two different approaches depending on what the needs are. You can scale horizontally, and that's when we show them the some of the sharding code features, and then also we can scale vertically. Okay, so Amazon actually has just about 2 months ago, I think, has announced their Quad XL instance sizes. So that gives you a way to very easily, using RightScale, kind of go from a small where you're sharing, I think on a 4-core machine, you have 1 core, all the way up to some significant horsepower.
So in the library here, we have the RightScale provided server templates. And then under Partners tab, we have partners from DB Shards.
And so Code Futures is the DB Shards partner. Okay, and that provides some sharding technology. Okay, but I think what's important to point out here is here you have in our server template library. What this is all about is RightScale working with a series of ISV providers, the technology providers out in the marketplace, to help them make their apps and their resources available on our platform. So we have partners including the ones that we've mentioned, Code Futures that does the DB sharding technology, partners like IBM, Alfresco, AI Cache, Dynex. So there's a whole series of partners that we work with, and we have a business development team that's specifically focused on building out this ecosystem so that our customers can get access to these best practice configurations like you see here. So there's that DB Shards 2.1 that we were talking about. Okay. And also the thing to note too, one last thing, is here on that clouds column, all of these server templates, when they're architected on RightScale, are architected with portability and multi-cloud in mind. So again, that includes two things. First and foremost, it includes the ability to access and take advantage of Amazon's multiple regions. So again, it's not just one cloud that they're offering. And then secondly, if you do have some specific configuration requirements that you would need to move something internal, so for a hybrid cloud type scenario, that's where these server templates are architected to work on Eucalyptus, as well as Amazon. Okay. So here's another one, Dave. I use Hyperion for app monitoring. Can I use it or something else in the cloud?
Yes. So with RightScale, we have CollectD. It's an open source monitoring plugin that you install on each of your servers. We can actually go ahead and show you that. I believe we showed you that during the demo. And on top of that, with our partners, we have monitoring from New Relic as well. And with the RightScale provided monitoring, we go to the dashboard here. So you can monitor the whole group of servers. So not just your server individually, but you get a unified view of all the servers within your environment.
Got it. So I think this is somewhat similar to the server template in the ISV partner program, in that RightScale as a platform has a host of native assets that customers can take advantage of, but it doesn't stop there. Right? So we're out there partnering with best-of-breed technologies and allowing our customers to get access to those technologies, but in such a way that they're proven and incorporating RightScale best practices on our platform. So Hyperion monitoring, if you don't want to use CollectD, you can use that.
RightScale is meant to be very extensible.
Got it. Okay. And a similar question, and also topical of this, is handling load balancing. So our default load balancing solution is software HA proxy, correct?
That's right.
Okay. But it doesn't stop there.
We also have many partners. We have partners with Zeus load balancing. And you can even use, the Amazon Elastic load balancing as well. Just kind of pick and choose.
Yeah, and that's actually a great point. So this is not just about, RightScale as a platform, bringing in ISVs, but what we also do, and paramount to our strategy, is embracing and tactically supporting the innovation from our infrastructure provider partners. So as Amazon releases or extends an additional piece of functionality, which they do an awful lot, Amazon innovates at an extraordinary pace. just a fantastic, fantastic crew over there. RightScale has made it part of our strategy to make sure that we support that innovation as best we possibly can at launch.
Yeah.
So if customers want to use load balancing from HA Proxy, that's fine. If they want to incorporate ELB from Amazon, that's fine too. If they want to also get a more sophisticated and more robust and a little bit better performance, there are ISV partners like Zeus.
It's what's best for the job.
Got it. So as a platform provider, it's truly what the customer wants and what's in their best interest based on their needs is where we focus. So we have another question here related to different stacks. Specifically, do we support IIS? So that gets to kind of RightScale's one of our top priorities from an R&D standpoint, and what to expect in 2010, which is Windows. So RightScale does support Windows today, but it is a limited support compared to our support for different Linux stacks. What is coming out in the first half of 2010 is essentially feature parity and automation parity with what our customers and users have become used to in RightScale for Linux, but for Windows. So stay tuned on that. We are going to be running a formal early access program. If you're interested in taking advantage of Windows on RightScale, please email us at sales@rightscale.com. We'd be happy to talk about your needs and your specific use cases, and hopefully get you into the queue. GA for Windows, specific date will be announced a bit later, but just wanted to let you all know that it is coming, and it is a top priority for us. So here's another one, Dave. Can I set up monitoring to watch external metrics such as Twitter trends?
Yeah, so with the collecting monitoring, you get a whole host of metrics. But if you want to monitor something else, like Twitter trends, you can create a custom monitoring plugin that will show up in our dashboard, and you can create custom alerts to automate off that. So I guess an example of Twitter from this customer, you want to keep up on the trends, if it's a gossip site or whatnot, and then just scale if there's it's a hot topic on Twitter right now.
Okay, got it. So, hang on, Dave. Sorry, we got another question. So, Dave, it looks like a lot of our focus has been on Facebook. So here's a question here, which is, do we also have social application experiences for iPhone apps?
We have plenty of mobile customers right now,
Okay.
To enable the auto-scaling backend to support the iPhone applications.
Okay. So here's another question of the successful Facebook games, how many are using EC2 for production? All of them. So, Amazon, as most of you are probably aware, is the most advanced and most robust cloud that is out there. So, the vast majority of the RightScale social gaming customers are on Amazon, and that's where the most advanced tools are. So again, RightScale's stance on this is it really is up to the customer. So we want to make sure that we are as open as we possibly can, that we modify our various different configuration assets to work on multiple different clouds. But really, ultimately, the decision is yours as the user and the customer in terms of where you want to deploy as far as a single cloud or multiple clouds or multiple regions. We had another question on what's the largest deployment. We need to respect our customer confidentiality agreements there, so we can't give you some exact details. But if you reflect back to that slide we showed you earlier on, we have dealt with some extremely large deployments and extremely large scaling events. So, up to about 6,500 cores that RightScale's managed as a single system. We've seen 100x scaling events, et cetera, et cetera. So that reminds me, these slides and the audio will be made available on rightscale.com/webinars, so you'll get access to those specific metrics if you just go ahead and download the deck after the webinar.
All right, so here's another question. How fast can I really scale? So with scaling, there are monitoring metrics from CollectD are sent every 20 seconds. So when you trigger an alert, so say it was based off 2 minutes, and you say to start up a server, you still have to wait for that server to come up online, and that can take anywhere from Josh, keep me it was like 5 to 7 minutes here, or 3 to 7 minutes, depending on what you're launching.
Yep, exactly. We had another question about how this applies to MMO, so massive multiplayer online games, and then also console games. Again, just like Windows, stay tuned. So specifically what we've taken you through today is architecture and best practices that have been packaged up for browser-based, either on the web or on mobile devices, social games. However, we're not stopping here. This is an intense focus both from a sales and segment marketing and product development standpoint this year, where you're going to see RightScale be rolling out solutions for MMOGs as well as console-based games later on in 2010. So this is the start of many things to come, specifically focused on the gaming space. So Dave, another question that came up is around those multi-account structures. The question is basically how would I go about adding additional accounts as an admin. So if I'm an IT admin, is there any limit to the number of accounts that I can add?
Accounts that you can currently manage, we support up to 5 accounts that you can manage under the enterprise umbrella. And it's just a matter of adding an account under the accounts tab, which will link to your under that umbrella of all the accounts that you're managing.
Okay, got it. We had another question here around automation. So specifically, it's what other alerts, what other metrics can be used to set alerts, and then what other types of automation can RightScale provide other than autoscaling?
So the alerts is really 2 parts. So you monitor the certain metrics. In this case, in the demo, we monitored CPU idle value. But you can monitor memory. You can monitor memory. You can monitor bandwidth. But you can also add custom monitoring as well, and then you can scale based off that. And then the escalation, the second part. So once it gets triggered, you can vote to grow up or scale down your servers, or you can have it run a script across multiple servers within your environment.
So Dave, maybe it'd be helpful if we showed that alerts tab.
Sure. So if I just jump into one of the servers, go to the front. In other escalations, you can vote to grow or scale down your servers, run the script. You can send an email, send a text message that's very urgent. So if we go to the alerts tab, here are just some of the metrics that come by default.
So here's a situation where basically there's a whole host of pre-configured alerts that RightScale has, and you can set automation within RightScale on any of these alerts. Is that right?
That's right, and that would be writing the script within your environment.
Okay, and so maybe it's important to point out because the questioner probably didn't realize this, but automation within RightScale are really called escalations.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so why don't we show folks what an escalation is and the different types? I think that'll help clear things up.
So if I go to the scale up escalation, here you scale up. An escalation really consisted of an action or a series of actions. So you can chain events together. So in this case, our action is to vote to grow the array, and then send an email to notify that we did grow this array. And other things that you can do, you can reboot the server, you can relaunch the server, or like I said, you can run a write script across servers within your cluster.
Great, thanks, Dave. So next question is, does RightScale support boot from EBS? Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, we do make it a policy to support as much of Amazon's tactical innovation as we possibly can at launch. Boot from EBS is on that list, and I believe it's coming out the next sprint.
Next sprint.
Okay, great. So that'll be roughly mid-February. Here's a situation where we're not exactly day of launch, but but it will be coming. It will be coming. So next question, do pre-configured social game deployments include the same deployment as the top social gaming companies are using, excuse me. So as what we showed you today, is that what best of breed in these top companies that we're already working with are using? We obviously can't go into anything that's proprietary specific to the customer, but you can think of these are a collection of RightScale best practices that we have pieced together based on a variety of different customer learnings and experiences, much of which is in the social gaming space, but also things like Animoto that we've dealt with, and other very, very large deployments that have had massive scaling events and massive web scale management needs. What's the maximum request per second on a single instance?
That's really going to depend on instance size and actually what you're serving up. So I mean that's going to vary.
Okay. So it looks like we got a couple different questions on costs. So let's talk about costs for a second. RightScale's business model is software as a service. So the base cost is a subscription fee that you pay RightScale on a monthly basis, which includes a certain set of features and also a certain number of resources under management. And that's on an hourly basis that resource under management is calculated. So we offer a variety of different packages. The best thing to do, and instead of just taking you through each one, is to go to RightScale.com and click on the Plans and Pricing tab, and you can take a look. And feel free to give us a call or shoot us an email at sales@RightScale.com. Is there any way to test for scaling issues before they happen? Absolutely. So this is a really, really key area, okay? And this is something that we've seen time and time again, and also happens to be one of the great value propositions of the cloud itself, which is if you think about some of these scaling events, so 0 to 35 million users, 100x in 3 days, okay? Forget about actually being able to pull it off. If you think about, what it would have taken pre-cloud to actually be able to do a user test at even 100,000, 200,000, or 1 million, it would have been impossible or just totally impractical from an economic decision to do that. We have test-to-dev scenarios that we're doing within RightScale, and we have partners that we're working with on the ISV ecosystem side, like SOSTA, where we're doing 1 million user testing loads before we're taking a deployment into production. So it's just a hugely advantageous situation that you have with the cloud and RightScale, where before it even happens, you will get an understanding of what your deployment is configured to be able to handle, and do so in a very, very quick way and very, very cost-effective way. So we've seen testing with other companies like StarCut, another partner of ours, customer of ours, excuse me, that has shared a couple of use cases, whereas they did testing, before the Olympics started and ended up, exceeding, their maximum peak, even when that spiked about 3x during any of their point during the Olympic Games. So huge part of RightScale and the value prop in the cloud is how we approach test and dev. You're going to hear a lot more about test and development later on this year. Just like we're doing with gaming, RightScale is packaging up a series of reference architectures and best practices that we're going to be delivering to market in conjunction with our partners like Amazon as well as the ISVs, and one of which is going to be specifically dedicated towards test and development.
Okay.
Looks like one more question just came in on hybrid clouds. So specifically with Eucalyptus, when will Eucalyptus support be released within RightScale? So let's talk about that. I don't have an exact date to give the audience yet. I'll get in trouble if I do that. But Eucalyptus 1.6 is available today. You can go get that at eucalyptussystems.com and download that and register it with RightScale. However, commercial support for Eucalyptus and commercial support that is specifically architected to work in conjunction with Amazon, all managed by the RightScale platform, that's going to be released later on this year. And that will be a package that is specifically released in a RightScale Scalable Web App Edition. And again, we'll work with both an internal Eucalyptus-enabled cloud that you can run on your own infrastructure, but allow you to seamlessly move deployments and take advantage of multiple different resource pools in-house as well as within Amazon. So if you are interested in Eucalyptus, then please do shoot us an email, sales@rightscale.com. Just like Windows, we're going to be running an early access program for the hybrid cloud deployments, and we'd love to talk to you about what your needs are and get you on that list.
Okay, that looks like it's the end of our questions, but as always, you can follow up with us if you have other questions that come to mind, and you can follow up with sales@rightscale.com, as well as you can download this webinar on the RightScale website. And then you can also check out, as Josh said, the pricing around this new edition and call us for further explanation on that. So thank you, Josh and Dave. Great job today, and thank you for everyone who attended, and we look forward to speaking with you again in the future.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.